Joining us today on today's show is Dino Eliadis. Dino started his entrepreneur journey at a young age when he washed cars for his mother's hair salon clients. That stoked his dream of becoming a business owner. After enrolling in the Air Force, Dino started his first business, which didn't succeed, but he didn't let that stop him. Today, he runs DE Inc., helping business owners achieve financial freedom and grow a self-sustaining business. Thank you for being on the show today, Dino.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Perfect. So today, I always start off with what do people know you by today, and how do you kind of get started, I guess, in your own business?
That's an interesting way to start, I guess. So I go by Dino, and people always ask me, "Is that your God-given name?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was." So I'm of Greek heritage, and that's a very Greek name. So that is my given name. Most of my friends and family all call me that as well. So Dino is perfectly fine as a way to address me. For those people that may want to follow me or whatever on Twitter, my Twitter handle is Revenue Mechanic. So feel free, and they can see what I'm talking about and things that I'm posting out there on the topics of business growth and achieving that independence and financial freedom that most business owners are looking for. So,
perfect. So, what do people know you by then? Dino as your name, but what kind of?
Yeah. So I guess in a nutshell, most people have a difficult time really kind of understanding what it is that I do, because there's not a lot of people out there that really are promoting themselves the way that I do. So there's lots of people that do business coaching and business consulting and that sort of thing, and they'll say, well, I'm a coach, I'm a consultant. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're a business owner, you're all of those things, right? Because you're helping the people that are a part of your team, and you should be doing that for your team anyhow. But really what it is, I guess, in a nutshell that I do for clients is think of me as a lot of people probably hired potentially a fractional chief financial officer or CFO. Think of me really as a fractional chief operating officer or a fractional COO. Most of the organizations that I've gone in and consulted on a large, on a not a full-time basis, but 2 or 3 days a week that I'm committing to them for a period of time. That's typically what I've gone in to do, run the overall operation for them, or what I call the revenue engine, the revenue cycle, so marketing, sales, the delivery of whatever it was that got sold, and then working with the accounting department to make sure that stuff gets billed and that sort of thing. So I'd say fractional CFO is probably a good way to look at me.
Oh, perfect. So
Okay.
in terms of, starting off and how you became your own business owner and now doing what you're doing, I mean, you mentioned tell us a little bit about like how you started, because I know we spoke earlier and you mentioned, your first entrepreneur was business was washing cars. So tell us
Yeah,
your story.
and it's funny because years later, when people ask me, they said, did your parents own a business? I mean, where did you get the knack for this, or, the inspiration to want, because being in business for yourself, you're a risk taker to some extent. And, so you probably, and not in all cases, I guess, because, you can't say, but if you've come up in that environment, I think is a reason that most people ask that question. And I kind of thought about it, and, it's like, well, I had a paper route when I was little and growing up and that sort of thing. But then it kind of clicked in my head, and I remembered the car wash. And the story with the car wash basically is my mother had a hair salon in our basement. She was a beautician. And so the ladies would come to get their hair done, every week. And, I look in the park, our driveway was a parking lot. There's all these cars out there. And so, how can I, I guess I didn't really think through. It was probably subconsciously going. I'm like, these cars are sitting in the lot. It's like, what if I put a car wash sign up on the bulletin board in the shop? And the instant that I did that, it was like every person didn't do it, but probably 30 to 50% of the people that were coming to get their hair done wanted their car washed at the same time. Made more money that year than I had ever made in my life. And I had a paper out at the time too. So it was like, I guess, and I said, at that point, I think I got the bug at that point is really kind of the way that I said it. And so I think I always had it. I obviously when we're young, our parents kind of steer us in a direction and they wanted me to go to college and do all of those kind of things. So I did them. But even when I was in that, I was always looking for things. Like while I was in college one summer, I had to go to summer school. So a best friend of mine and I said, well, let's start a painting company or whatever, and we'll paint, houses and do painting and stuff like that. So we painted for the summer, and that was the way that we got our spending money for the next, for the fall semester or whatever. And it's always been that way. Even when I was in the Air Force, while I was in the Air Force, some buddies of mine and I had one of the hangouts that we went to downtown that came up for sale. My wife worked for a real estate company, and they got the listing for the business. And like, really, that's going to go up for sale? Well, let's take a look at it. And so some of the guys, that I was getting my MBA with, at the University of Missouri at the time, we were all like, well, let's check this out. So we were using the skills that we were learning in the business classes and everything else to evaluate. So I guess I've always kind of had something that was kind of eating at me at the back, but I don't think it really kind of consciously came in until, years later when I was in the Air Force in my second assignment, and I said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to consult with this stuff. And, I think from that point forward, really everything that I did with my career, it was planned out. Obviously there are external forces that are going to push you and move you in certain directions. I know one of the questions that you had kind of asked the other day, and, what kind of steered your career or whatever, have you had to pivot, which is kind of the, it's the buzzword, I guess. And if I look at it, about every 7 years since I've been in business, and I've been in business for almost 30 years now, about every 7 years, I have to reevaluate what it is that I'm doing, because the market is dictating that it's moving in this direction. And so if I don't begin to transition DE Inc. or, the Business Growth Simplified brand to move in that direction, then, I'm going to go the way of the buggy whip, not going to be necessary anymore. And so about every 7 years, I'd say, what I'm doing shifts, a few degrees one way or the other, really, to kind of go. So that kind of, I guess, is the entrepreneurial journey kind of bringing me current to this year. Yeah.
Yeah. Even I look back, and I know you mentioned 7 years, and I even start looking and reevaluating my business on a short-term basis, like every 3 months or every year, because of technology today, right? Like there's so much going on, and there's so many new software and things that actually can improve your efficiencies, and just evaluating your processes, right?
Well, and they're disrupting the way that you're doing what it is that you're doing anyhow. And if you don't make the transitions that you need to for that, you're going to be a dinosaur, right?
Yeah. And it's really to help you work more efficient, right? So how can you scale or make the most of your time or your team's time? And is there software or solutions available to do that?
Help you, right? Absolutely.
So I totally get it, and try to looking at opportunities, right? Like self-reflecting in terms of pivoting and seeing if it makes sense revenue wise, or is there growth potential, right?
Right.
Sure. So I know we talked about this earlier, but was there anyone that kind of inspired you to become who you are? Was there coaches, mentors, family members?
Yeah, it's really kind of a mismatch, a mishmash of all of those things, I think. So I think um, I've had my 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 dad was an influence, you know, in some ways, I think more from a discipline and, you know, put your head down and work hard kind of a perspective, because I definitely got that from him. Even though I don't agree with a lot of the things, we don't have the best of relationships these days. But um, and so early in my life, I had an uncle, my mother's younger brother, that he was in the Navy. He was pretty much self-made and went off on his own, you know, and left the nest early and that sort of thing. And I always looked to him because the way that he was with his family and the way that he, you know, his level of professionalism, you know, for being in the military and stuff like that. I think he was one of the reasons why I looked at the military in the first place, you know, and I looked and there was an opportunity there, and that's why I kind of moved in that direction. So, and it's funny because he died very young from pancreatic cancer. And his youngest son just got married a few weeks ago, and we went to the wedding, and, you know, everyone really talked about him the whole time we were there. What would he think? And, you know, what a great guy he was and everything else. So he left a lasting impression on our family, you know, and that was something that, you know, that's what I want to do to the world. I mean, that's part of my vision is to leave that. So I think he was an early influencer for sure. Another influence, I think, was while I was in the Air Force, my second assignment, there was a program, a training program that I was required to go through because of a project that I was working on. I was one of the team leaders for an organizational wide change that was going on. And the name of the course was Managing Technological Change. Okay. And it's like, oh, this is going to be a cool, you know, course to go through or whatever. And that two-day workshop spoke nothing at all about technology in any way, shape, or form. It was all about organizational change, resistance within, you know, from people that are being asked to change and all that other kind of stuff. And it influenced everything that I did from that point forward. I didn't take, even though I kind of came up in technology, I never took a technology approach to everything. I always looked at, you know, what was the disruption to the way that people were already doing and what kind of change were they going to be asked to make as a result of all of this. And it influenced the way that I thought and the way that I solve problems and everything that I do. I always took that people aspect into things as well. So, you know, that's probably one of the biggest driving factors, I think, with where it is today, because most of what it is that I do is we can fix the business. The business is just mechanical kind of things, but the owner, and really getting into the owner's head and understanding, you know, why are you doing what it is that you're doing? What is it that you really want from your life? You know, and how can we then, you know, move and turn the business in a manner that takes you in that direction instead of, you know, being diametrically opposed to what it is that you're doing. So that was a big one as well. Um, when I was getting ready to get out of the Air Force, uh, one of the things that really kind of sparked that was I don't know if you may be too young to remember this, but I mean, Entrepreneur Magazine used to have this program. You know, it was this big, thick binder like this. It was called Be Your Own Boss. And I saw an infomercial for that, and I was like, you know, I'm going to buy that. You know, that I'd really like to see what goes into this. Well, inside of the package when it came was a cassette tape, and it was this was early on before Tony Robbins was a, you know, super success or anything like that. And I listened to that tape, and man, I was a Tony Robbins disciple from that. So anything that Tony Robbins has got to go, you know, is talking about or anything else is probably something that I'm listening to and that sort of thing. Then once I got out and really started my business, I've had two mentors really. The first one I met probably within the first 3 or 4 months that I was out, Richard Gerson. Richard passed away several years ago, very young. He was probably in his mid 50s when he passed away unexpectedly. But he was a he had a PhD in sports psychology. Was, but he was a marketing guru in terms of the whole psychological aspect and influencing people through marketing and that sort of thing. And so I learned, because I didn't know anything about marketing. You mentioned earlier about the failure that I had. I didn't do a good job, not with my promotional part, but actually with my market research part. And that's really what caused that failure. We have to talk about that, I'm sure, probably a little bit later. But Richard was a big influence in me from that area. And I think a reason a lot of what he said resonated with me was because of that managing technological change course that I had gone, and I understood how much people influenced everything that we did in business. And so, you got to communicate, and you have to connect with your customers, your employees, your vendors, everyone that is a part of your team. And so Richard was very influential, I think, early on. And then later on, when I kind of went back to corporate for a short period of time. When I came back, Jim Lang is he's actually a friend from one of the. I met him through his wife, who was a peer of mine while I was working back in the corporate sector for about 2 or 3 years, and we really connected. But man, he will hold you accountable like nobody else will hold you accountable. And even though I was pretty disciplined before, he made me even more disciplined than I was before, and understand the real need for accountability in all the things that we did. So, those are probably the biggest people. I mean, recently, people that I'm reading a lot more of and that sort of thing. Robert Kiyosaki, his whole philosophy is really kind of the foundation that Business Growth Simplified is really kind of built on. It's don't think of your business as a job. Think of it as an asset, and you need to build it like an asset. Which is a lot of what Robert talks about. In all of his Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of stuff. And another one that I would say is Scott Peck, and a lot of people may not have really heard of Scott Peck before. Scott Peck is like the father of modern therapy. He wrote the book "The Road Less Traveled," which it's an old book. I think it was written like in the late '60s or early '70s. But if you want to get your mind right, that book, I've probably read it 3 or 4 times, and every time I read it, I learn something new about myself. And so, I think it's less about learning the tactical things of what it is that have really kind of resonated with me, and reading and learning the things that make me a better person, because me becoming a better person makes me a better leader for my business and for the people that I lead, as a part of what it is that I do. So those are probably the biggest influences for me.
Yeah, I think that a big thing is continually learning. You don't have to have like a lot of close people that like mentors or coaches, but maybe a few. And
Yep.
then there's a ton of experts and authoritative figures that have written great pieces of content in books
Absolutely.
or in webinars or in blogs or whatever it may be, that you can kind of resonate with, as long as you pick and choose who you want to really gravitate towards and stay educated and stay motivated to continually learn. I mean, that's the whole point of being a business owner, because once you stop learning and once you kind of give up on trying to get better, and you have to understand there's so much information out there.
Yep.
And you don't have to ingest every single piece, but really pick and choose who you want to learn from, and take on some information here and there, and then use it and actually deploy it in your own practice, right?
Absolutely.
And that will really resonate with you, your staff, your team, whatever you're trying to build in terms of a company, because end of the day, it's your life, right? And you got to make the most out of it. And the more you spend on yourself, educating yourself, taking care
Absolutely.
of yourself, the better you're equipped to help others.
Well, let me do a promotion for you then, because based off of what you said, and I agree 100% with what you said, this series that you guys are putting together here is a perfect example of that, because you guys are giving lots of bits of people and introducing, your listeners to, lots of different perspectives and different, everyone's not going to necessarily like what I have to say, but, maybe who you're going to interview tomorrow or, next week or the week after that may resonate with them. And so, you guys are actually providing them with great content in terms of, here's lots of different people that we've come across. You pick and choose who it is that you'd like to follow and who really kind of resonates with you and that you may want to kind of gravitate towards. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Because there's so many, like there's hundreds of millions of people out there, right? And you don't have to connect with every single one of them.
Right.
But they have tons of experience. They've lived through a lot of businesses. They've met a lot of businesses and they understand how to grow and be successful in their own business. So picking and choosing and deciding what you want to ingest and use for your own business would be very useful for yourself, right? So,
yeah.
I was gonna ask you. So some of the challenges. So I know you've kind of mentioned that your first business was not successful. So tell us a little bit about that, and how did you overcome them, and why did you continue pursuing being an entrepreneur?
Oh man, the failures. Do we really want to go back there?
Well, we have to, right? Because it's not really a failure. Because as long as you continue learning and you pick yourself up, I mean,
right? No, absolutely. I think you have to pay more attention to the failures than you do even the even because here's the thing. Failures make you humble, okay? Successes make you egotistical and prideful, okay? And those pridefulness and egotisticalness will kill your business faster than anything. I tell people all the time, I mean, if you want your business to grow, you have to become humble. And so, I think those failures are the things that really kind of bring us back. I mean, going back to that area, I mean, that was early after, I kind of got out of the Air Force. And really kind of what happened there was when we were getting out, I didn't really think about the business and where we were going from a business standpoint. We moved to the Tampa Bay area because my mom and dad had come here. And so my family was slowly migrating to this area. And it was like, we had a young family, so we're going to move to the area. The problem is with what my original business was, the aerospace industry was my target market, and there's not a lot of aerospace. Now, there's a few companies here. I mean, I would have been better suited if I was in aerospace to have gone to the East Coast, and been closer to Cape Kennedy and NASA and, all of that kind of stuff, because there was lots of stuff over there. Could I drive across the state? Yeah, not every day. And, after a while that becomes problematic. And so that first mistake was really, came as a result of me not really looking, for what it is that you're doing, where your customer's located, and it probably is it going to be easy for you to be able to get to those customers based off of where you're going. So, we probably would have been better off being, and moving to where my wife's family was, but they lived in Kansas City, and it's like if you have the if you got the choice between Kansas City and Florida, where are you going? It's like, well, we grew up in the cold, so we're going to where it's warm at. And it was like, well, we were too young to be looking at our retirement strategy at that point. So
what I'll also mention is for all the listeners, so this is probably over 30 years ago. The internet and websites did not exist back then. So you have to be, clear in terms of, you're talking about bricks and mortar, setting up shop, and going and creating a business close to where most of the clients would be located.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
because right now, I mean,
Yeah.
technology
Most people wouldn't understand that
would
whole
not
thing.
understand
Yeah,
what
yeah,
that
yeah.
whole idea is, because storefront, I mean, it's a completely
Completely
changed.
different. Yeah. Completely different animal than being on, than being an online business. Absolutely. Absolutely. I
So
appreciate that. That's a good point. That's a very good point. I hadn't really thought about it that way, John, for sure. And I mean, in today's world, those things would have been, I could have easily probably overcome a lot of those. I mean, just the way that we're doing it right now. I mean, how many thousands of miles away and you're interviewing me, and we're seeing each other right now. I didn't have that kind of technology. That stuff cost, tens of thousands of dollars to have that on a monthly basis. So yeah, that's a
yeah,
good
and
point.
the barriers to entry is so low today, right? With technology.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
so anyone could start a business, but back then there were a lot of other barriers that you had to overcome. Rent,
absolutely.
and then there
Absolutely.
were only traditional media that you can use
Use right.
for salespeople,
Yep.
and then the telephone, right? And which is not even a smartphone. Like there was no mobile devices, right? So
Yeah, it wasn't like you could do that from your car. You
there
had to
was
be
no
sitting at your
computer
desk.
either,
That's
right?
right. Yeah,
So
there's a wire going in the wall, and you were only going as far as that wire was
and
going.
there's maybe a fax machine,
Yep,
and that's about it. A typewriter. I mean, that's how you kind of
that's
operate
how you
as a business,
operated.
right?
Yep, yep.
But things kind of transitioned over the years to have a desktop, and then became a little bit more affordable, where then you have faster internet instead of dial up, and then you have a smartphone, right? Which everything is now instant, and now there's
Absolutely.
apps, right? Like things have kind of evolved over the years, where people don't really understand how difficult, or maybe business, how business was operated back then, and
Yep,
things have kind of evolved in the last 10, 10, 15 years, right?
yep.
With the advent of search engines even today, because before it was newspapers, directories, and magazines,
Right.
radio, television,
No,
right?
you understand that because that's the world that you came from, right? I mean,
Exactly.
that's completely transitioned and changed. I mean, I had a client that we were trying to help to make that transition, and they couldn't make that, they couldn't shift their mind to understand how that new technology was working. They're out of business now, as a result of that. So you brought something up though that, I had thought about based off of some of the questions that you sent me to kind of think through and think about. And here's something that you said. You're absolutely right that with all of the barrier of entry to get into a business now, because of all of the tools and technology that are available to us, is very low. So it's everybody has an opportunity to get into business. The problem, though, that they have to keep in their mind is the basic principles, even that we used in those days of brick and mortar and, the way that we used to do things, haven't changed because they're fundamental principles. And I think that's a lot of times the things that startups don't learn early on. And so they plateau and they only get to a certain point because they're unwilling to change that mindset and learn those new things that they need to, that will allow them to scale that business beyond what it is that they can actually control themselves. And so, it's a balance between understanding all this new technology and applying it, but you still need to understand those fundamental principles that drive growth in a business. And if you can learn to marry those two things together, then there's nothing standing between you and you can do it. It's just a matter of time and chipping away at those things, those obstacles that begin to kind of come in front of you. So
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, running a good business, what does that mean? Well,
right,
you want to be profitable, you want to take care of your clients, you got to provide a service that someone needs,
right,
and do it better than some of your competitors, price it well, provide better customer service. Like all these things are kind of fundamentals, right?
those are things that were
And it
around
cannot,
for decades,
and you
if
cannot
not for,
replace
yeah,
it with technology, right?
yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
technology has kind of enhanced it, and there's ways to become more streamlined and efficient in some realm of picture. But
Right.
think about like running a successful business, these are
Absolutely.
things that you still really need to understand as a core fundamentals, right? uh,
Right.
And then of course your bookkeeping, inventory costs, like all these things, there's technology for that
Right.
that can help you because you might not be strong in it. But yeah, like I totally agree with a lot what you're talking about.
So very good point of what you said. I mean, you brought up all the right things. I mean, the three things that are involved in everything are people, process, and technology. Okay, or tools. And the tools have changed and made it easier. You know, we have bigger levers than we've had in the past necessarily, but the other two pieces don't change. I mean, the process may change a little bit because of the technology that I have, so I can shorten it, but I still have to do the things that I have to do as a business, or I don't have a business, right? And that's typically when people have problems. There's something missing out of all of that. So
Yeah, and I mean, today's business owner, there's so many things out there to
right,
look out for, right? And there's
right,
no, before like 20, 30 years ago, there were only a couple mediums to choose from,
right,
right? And there were only a couple avenues that you can really focus on. Today, there's thousands of apps to websites to social media to technology software to pick from. I mean, where to even start? And that's where it's information overload, or
yep,
there's too much
yep,
options, and therefore they don't even want to start the process because they
right,
don't want to get into that rabbit hole of maybe they're not even comfortable with technology in the first place,
right.
and they just want to go back to what it used to be.
Was yeah,
However, things aren't the way it used to be, and you need to slowly understand how it works and
out of
how, yeah, right.
yeah.
But yeah, we
Well,
work with a lot of clients, that have kind of migrated away from very old school to new school digital age.
right.
And, that whole educational piece is very difficult, especially if it's already mentally in their mindset and they're not willing to change, right?
People are in their comfort zone and they don't want to get out of that comfort zone, right? And I mean, that's as people that are providing, new ways of thinking, John, you and I both understand that, more of what we do is probably trying to psychologically make people feel comfortable to get outside of that comfort zone, because if that comfort zone gets bigger, that's what creates more success in their life. I mean, you can only get so much because the circle's only so big. Make the circle bigger, and people become more successful as a result of all of that. I mean, for the most part, that's really what it is that our Business Growth Simplified brand is really all about. It's understanding those fundamental principles. Those haven't changed, okay? And so one of the things that you mentioned, John, about there's tens of thousands of choices out there, is because people are looking. Most of the choices are tactical kind of things. They're things that you can implement, in your business, that potentially will help you. I find the problem is, though, most business owners don't know how to think strategically, so they don't even understand what it is they're doing and what strategy they're applying. Because if they understood that piece, guess what? It's not 10,000 choices they have anymore. Maybe now it's only 5 or 10, because this is the direction or the strategy that I've chosen, and these are the only 4 or 5 that will work as a part of that. So now it's significantly reduced the number of things that I have to look at, and that takes a lot of stress off of me. It's not 10,000 things anymore. It's 4 or 5, and I can look at 4 or 5 as manageable for me, even as entrepreneur. So,
And I also want to reiterate, where a business owner that's been doing this certain process for years and years, they
yeah,
should get someone outside
outside to look at it.
to really look and see
Absolutely.
where there are gaps, bottlenecks, inefficiencies, things that you can improve on, because someone that doesn't see what you see on a daily basis, they
Right.
will understand. And maybe you are great with all the software and technology out there that can really streamline some of the efficiencies and costs and time, right? Because
Right.
at the end of the day, if you're able to save money and time with
Right.
clients, reduce their costs, increase their revenues, generate more profit, I mean, that's what people are
That's
looking
what it's
for,
for. Right. Right.
right?
Well, and that's a good point that you say. I mean, actually, if there was any one thing that I would want a listener to take away from this is you've said it more than one time. Okay, you keep saying efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. What I don't, one of the things I think a lot of small business owners don't really understand is profitability of your company is a measure of your efficiency. Okay. So if you become more efficient, you'll become more profitable, period. End of story. If I don't change anything else other than I can do what I'm doing faster, I'll become more profitable. So if you want to, a lot of times people when they jump on a bandwagon, well, I got to cut this cost to put, that's a short-term fix, and it's not going to fix it in the long term if you're just cutting and that's the only way you're doing. If you become more efficient, once you become more efficient, I don't go back unless I let it slip back to the way that it was. That increased efficiency will continue to produce that additional profit that you've created. And so usually when we go in someplace where they're having a cash flow problem or their profitability is low, that's the first thing we look at is how can we make you more efficient than what it is? What are you doing that you're spending way too much time doing, And it may not even be things that you have to throw a technology at. It's like we're doing this, and it's like, but what is that adding to the value of what it is that you're doing? If it's not, throw it away. Well, as soon as we threw it away, that's time we're not spending on something else, and I've freed that person up to do something else, that actually does bring more revenue to the company, and all of that drops to the bottom line because I already have those costs. So,
No, these are all really good points because business owners think about it's all the price and price, right? Like that's the first thing they think about. They don't think about the operating costs and the time their staff is using, spending on doing it, or if there are other ways to reduce that cost, right? Operating costs, because end of the day, there's a lot of solutions out there that can reduce your costs and save you time, right? You just have to be out there willing to look for it. Right.
And I think a lot of the reason that people don't have that is because most people that are getting advice and guidance are getting advice and guidance normally from their CPA or accountant. Okay. The things that we're talking about aren't things that show up on your financial statement. I mean, your profit obviously shows up on your financial statement, but if it's not where you do, why isn't it that way? I have to look at other stuff. So what I find that most companies don't understand are those operational metrics. Okay, how long is someone taking to do things, and how long should they be taking to do things? And so, a lot of what it is that I've really kind of created is the management, that operational management model that we call tuning your revenue engine. And what it really gets down, and that model is all about how much time should people be spending so that I can actually evaluate somebody's performance, that they're actually doing, they're taking the amount of time that they should be taking to do a sale, okay, to generate a lead, okay, to do the work that we were contracted to do, to actually bill the customer and collect from the customer. If you don't know how much time people are taking for that, and they're taking more time than they do, it's just like you said. I mean, that's all things that are all eating into your profit and costing you more than it should. So it ultimately comes down to cost, but it's because people are taking too long. I have actually a really good example of that. We had a client that we worked with for a lot of years that had that same, very small business, carpet cleaning business and they had hired 3 techs, and they saw their profitability drop. And it's like, we're doing more work than we ever did before, and we can't understand, we have negative profit. I mean, we're losing money, what's going on? Well, because we had these reports that we've been looking at to see what everybody's productivity, when we looked at those, the time when Mike was actually doing the work, they were making $72 per job was the revenue that was being generated for those jobs. When we went back and we looked at, now that they had 3 technicians that were doing the work along with Mike part-time, they were only bringing in $56 per job. Okay. And it's like, well, that's where it's at. They're not doing enough jobs. And as a result of that, soon as we identified that, within 6 months, that once we set the bar and everything else, they swung from like negative 17% to 26% to the good net profit in those months that followed after that. And they were able to do profit sharing with their customers at the same time. So I'm not the customers, with their employees. So their employees that were making $12 an hour now are making $15 to $17 an hour, and they're making more profit at the same time. So that's a good example of what you were talking about, where, as people are working more efficiently and at the level that they should be, we're bringing in enough money. They didn't have to increase their price or anything else. Everything stayed the same. The only thing that we did was got more work out of the people at the level that they should have been working at. And
Yeah.
that was the difference. So
Yeah. So as a business owner, you really need to know your margins, right? Your
absolutely.
profit, your revenue, your sales, your costs, your variable costs, your fixed costs. I mean,
Yep.
these are fundamental accounting
Yep.
terms, but someone that hasn't been studying that and
That
starting
doesn't
off
know what
as a
you're
business
talking about.
owner, it's very difficult to really grasp what this all means, right? But
Right.
what it really means is, if someone's paying a service for you and you're not making money out of it, why are you even doing it?
Doing it.
Right? So, right, like, it
Bingo.
doesn't make sense. And why are you in business?
Right.
Like, the whole point is for you to
Make a
have a survival, like have an income to survive off, right? And have a better life than if you were to work under someone else, right?
Right.
There's other opportunities there. But yeah, like, ultimately, as a business owner, these things you really have to think about. And I'm very fortunate that I studied finance in university.
Okay.
And my wife is an accountant as well, so I'm
So you
fortunate.
covered.
But I've always been, I'm good with my numbers, and
Yep.
it kind of just, it's always on the mind, in the back of my mind, in terms
Right.
of like everything I do, right? Which you need that if you're in business, right?
And that frightens, I think that frightens a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners. So one of the things that I guess I would say at this point too is, I think part of the problem is typically when people get when people go to find out and learn about those things, people want to teach them QuickBooks and they want to teach them accounting. And you don't, as a business owner, you don't have to become an accountant. Okay. So you have to but you have to learn what the numbers mean more than everything else. And so, even the way that I teach my clients to review and look at their financials, it's very basic and very simple. Okay. I'm only interested in 4 numbers. Okay. If I have a budget and I say, and my number and those 4 numbers match up with what my budget was supposed to be, I don't care what all the detail is below it, because, I don't care if I'm spending more on, on printing costs than I am on than what I budgeted for travel, as long as my overall expense is staying in line with where it was that I budgeted that I wanted it to be. I have bigger things to think about as a business owner. And so the only things that I really am watching is how much revenue am I on target for what my revenue target was? Are my cost of goods staying within budget, as a percent of revenue? So in other words, if I said that my cost of goods sold was going to be 40% of revenue, is it staying, 38 to 42%? If it is, I'm not digging into all the details. And I think too often that's what scares and terrifies business owners, because their accountant brings in and wants them to go through all of this stuff. So we teach them, these are the 4 things, that expenses, if your expenses, as a percent of revenue was only supposed to be, was supposed to be 20%, or 25%, as long as it's staying within that range, I'm good. And then is my net profit where I want it to be? If it is, I'm not digging into any of the detail. The detail is there, so then when it does get out of whack, I can go and I can look and I can find out why I'm, and that's going to point me in the direction that I need to go in. Typically, though, if they're managing through the stuff that, that we teach them on the operational side, that proactively is managing, and a lot of that stuff never shows up on the financial statement because they're proactively managing their business instead of reacting to what they saw that happened last month on their financial statements. So
Yeah. I think people also have to realize like a business, there's a lot of businesses out there to even start or get into, right? And
absolutely.
people can either start with no revenue if
Yep.
they just have an idea and they want to get going. They start with getting backing
Right.
from or you can get a loan from the bank or get financing. You can buy an existing business, but you have to understand what's suitable for your life, right? It's not really
Absolutely.
everyone thinks of starting a business as I have an idea and I
Right.
want to get this going and I'm gonna make whatever be the next Facebook or Google or whatever.
Right.
That's like 1 in a trillion, and it's timing as well. It's this
Right.
lifetime. So not everyone's gonna be that successful. All you need is enough for yourself, right?
Right.
So projecting and figuring out what is suitable for your life is very important. And you know making sure that you're a good fit to be a business owner as well, because not
Absolutely.
everyone's going to be successful or have the right skill set even, right?
Absolutely.
Mental standpoint, because not everyone's meant to be a business owner.
Right. Yeah. Got to figure those things out early. And and what's that's really step one in our process is, you know, really understanding yourself and what you want, not from the business, okay? Because the business is just a vehicle to give you what it was that you've defined that you want your life to be, okay? And so I think if more people took that approach, even to starting a business, more people wouldn't make the mistake of getting into it, when it wasn't really what it was that they wanted, I mean, tell people all the time, people think you're going to get rich by starting a business. And it's like, I mean, you'd be surprised at how many clients that I have that make more money than I make, for sure, and it's like, well, and why is that? And it's like, well, because I do it because I enjoy doing it and it gives me joy and happiness for helping people to achieve what their dream and their goals are. Okay. And if I'm getting that, that's enough payment for myself, as long as I'm making enough to make, and cover the bills. And so, it's not about becoming, mega wealthy or anything else for me, and it's never really been about that. So maybe that's part of the problem why I can't retire now. So
Well, at least you're doing something you love, right? And a
oh
lot of
yeah, that's
people
what it's all about.
like they have to realize, if you're doing it all for the wrong reasons, it's going to catch up to you, right? So
Right.
do things for what you're passionate about,
Right.
figure out what your why is, and then go after that, right?
Right.
But find something that you really enjoy doing ultimately. And it might not be in business. It might be helping others, philanthropy,
For
right?
yours. Right. Now that doesn't mean that you can't have that and a business isn't the right way to get there necessarily either. But if that's the case, now the business, like you'd mentioned before, John, I mean, it's not all about, having an idea or whatever. If I want to be able to get, and this is a lot of what it is that we do through our process is, look, if you know, once you know what your life is and you say you want to be a philanthropist, okay, how much money do you need in order on an ongoing basis in order to do that? Once we figured that out, then we look at, is there a business that you can get and get it up and running so that you can do that in the next 3 to 5 years without any problem whatsoever? And that business will run by itself and generate the income that you need. And really that philosophy that you mentioned at the beginning, of building self-sustaining businesses, that's really what it is that we do at D Inc. We help business owners to get to that point, and our process really kind of, follows that model to help you, because in a lot of cases, you'd be surprised how many times I've gone into a business of somebody that's been working in the business for 15 or 20 years, and they say, well, this is how much money I need. And it's like, the business is already throwing that amount of money off. So what's the problem? The problem is they're focused on what everybody's telling you. You need to grow the business. You need to grow the business. And I tell them, no. I said, your top priority is you need a succession plan. and you need to bring someone in to run your business for you. Okay. And if we can put that in place, how long will it take us to put that in place? It's like, oh, 6 to 12 months. I'm like, well, then you can retire in 6 to 12 months. We just got to find that person, get them trained, and get you the reporting on a regular basis that you need to know that they're doing what it is that they need to be doing, so you can hold that person and everyone else in the company accountable, and then you can retire. It's like, well, where's my paycheck going to come? It's going to be the net profit that your business is throwing off month to month. That's your paycheck. You don't, you know,
Yeah.
so.
It's hard, especially if someone's been in it for so long,
Oh,
doing
yeah,
what they've been doing and not accustomed to even retirement, right? Like
absolutely.
people that have been working 40, 50 years of their lives, they form a habit, right? And they
Right.
are so used to going in, doing what they need to do, go for coffee or whatever it is,
Yep.
right? Whatever habit it is.
Right.
So if any change, people are afraid of, they're
Oh,
scared,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
So as a business owner, I mean, I know you mentioned every 7 years you kind of self-reflect. I
Yep.
mean, in today's age, I do it on a regular
Oh,
basis
I do that month. Yeah.
because
Yearly.
it's a little bit different than how it was before, right? But
Sure.
change. There's a lot of business owners that have been doing what they've been doing for so many years, and they just get used to it, and they are so comfortable, right? And they're happy, which is fine, right? As long as they're happy, it doesn't really matter to them,
Right.
to anyone, right?
Yep.
But it's the ones that are miserable, the ones that are, just hate what they're doing. Like, why are you doing what you're doing then,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually have a tool for that, because a lot of business owners, when I go in, it's like, well, I hate doing that. It's like, but we need to do that. Okay. I mean, that's like we mentioned earlier. There are certain functions within the business. If they don't happen, that's why the business is broke. Okay. So I have this, it's called a love hate matrix. It has every function and everything that needs to happen in any business in order for the business to be able to function. And all I do is I have the owner go through it, and they write whether they love or they hate next to each one of them. And then what we do is we take that and I say, okay, now I'm going to teach you a skill of delegating. Okay. And what we're going to begin to do is to learn and practice that skill by delegating the things that you hate. Okay. And you'd be surprised, over the next 90 days, as we begin to do that process, the stress level goes down because they're not having to do it. They're learning the new skill that they need. Okay. And at the same time, the thing that that you started with there, John, with, they built bad habits, and they fear change or whatever. They begin to feel that change, and they're not quite as controlling over those things, and then things start to happen. It's like it starts to roll down a hill, and it's much easier to get them to do the things that they need to do at that point. So,
And I think this happens when you have some buffer and you have employees, like depending on where you're at or what kind of business you operate. But if you're a solopreneur, you're
yeah,
doing everything yourself, you have to love it and hate it and figure out how to do it. But when you're capable to start hiring and you start getting 5, 10, 20 staff members, you
right.
focus on what you love
You're
doing
doing right.
and you'll do it really well.
Yep,
And the one stuff that you don't like, yeah, you can delegate it and get them to report back to you on things that you don't like, right?
yep, yep.
And eventually you'll live a happier life, less stress, more sleep, and everyone around you will feel happier
Yep.
because you aren't miserable, right? So all these will actually be better outcomes.
Right.
And that's a really good point you brought up. But I talk about that all the time. Like at the
Yeah.
beginning, you just don't have resources. So you
Yeah.
have to,
So you got to do it all yourself.
you gotta suck it up.
But like you said earlier, as a result of that, what you do is you form that habit up front, okay? And then you have a hard time letting go of it. So you have to understand, when you start doing it and you're having to do everything in the beginning, you have to keep telling yourself, this is only for a short period of time. It's only for a short period of time. And then they have to learn that skill of delegating and outsourcing things. Even if you're a solopreneur, from time to time, you have to outsource stuff to other people. So, that's part of your team as well. And you have to lead that team. And
Yeah.
so you have to learn those other skills along with
And
it as
you
you
have
go.
to know when to hire because if you can earn more money doing what you love,
Yep.
go do it and find other people that will cost you a little bit
Right.
money, but you'll save money by
Money in the
doing
long
it.
run. Well, you'll
Um,
be able to do more of the part that you love because
exactly,
other people are doing what you don't want to do. So
exactly.
you got to set it up that way, and you got to think it through and put a plan together and execute that plan that
Yeah,
way.
exactly. But a
That's
lot of business owners, I mean, they just kind of wing it or they kind of just do it. And that's why there's so much failure in business, right? Like people
absolutely.
don't really think through things. However, that's what we're having this podcast as
That's
well. And
right.
there's a lot of people out there. I mean, there's challenges, right?
Sure.
And they don't know where to go, who to turn to, what to even do with that. And there's a lot of people, business owners love helping others, right? And that's
Amen.
why I find the most like we're the most giving kind of people that we don't expect anything in return. Like honestly, I just want to make sure that other people can take some bits and pieces here and there and utilize it, and hopefully that impacts other people, right?
Right.
So yeah, I really agree with a lot of stuff you're talking about. And what I've kind of, I look at all the stuff you talk about, but it's
Yep.
always in the back of my mind and I don't really talk about it
Right.
because I think a lot of business owners should have already known that stuff, right? It's like the basic fundamentals, but most business owners probably didn't even go to business school and they've never worked with other businesses that have scaled or not scaled or whatever. Like they're
No, you're right.
in their own zone, right? Knowing their business inside out.
You bring up a point actually that is a point of contention really kind of with me, because that thought that you just had, that you just shared there, is very similar in the way that a lot of the technical assistance programs that are out there for many small business owners, I mean, you have, your scores and, your small business development centers here in the US. I don't know what you guys have got, similar, I'm sure you guys have got similar kind of programs. Even a lot of the entrepreneurial programs and things like that. What I find that most of those places are really the programs that those places have are all the tactical stuff that we were talking about before. Well, you got to learn accounting and you got to learn this, and you got to learn that. And it's almost like they do a disservice to an owner trying to teach them all of these disciplines that they only need a small piece of that. And what most people aren't learning is how do those things all tie together at a higher level. And so the program that we put together, that's what it addresses. I'm not trying to compete with everyone else that's delivering all that other training. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get business owners to look strategically and understand these are the things that influence and drive business growth. And they're not the things that you're being told by most trusted advisors out there. Okay. I mean, that my book, Business Growth Simplifies, talks about what are the 8 factors that really drive business growth. And there's 4 factors that are owner factors, and 4 factors that are business or company factors. And the owner factors are the owner's ability, to have a goal. Do they have a goal? What's the owner trying to achieve, and is everything directed towards that? So the owner's goal, their ability to think strategically, okay, their ability to manage, and then their operational skill. And what I typically find are, most owners don't have those 4 things, and so we got to work on those 4 things. But they're not think. Have you heard of classes for all of that stuff? Maybe here and there, 1 or 2 of them, but nobody's really teaching that stuff. Then on the company side, the 4 factors are financial resources, personnel resources, systems, and business assets. Okay, you didn't hear me talk about marketing, sales, operations, customer service, or any of that other stuff. If you think about the 4 factors I just talked about, those 4 factors are used in all of those business functions, right? And so the way we basically say is master these skills that cut across all of your areas, and then it becomes easier for you to do the functions because now you know what it is that you have to focus on for your business specifically, and now you can go take the right courses. I don't need, for my industry, maybe social media isn't the right way to go. Maybe the right way for me to really, that I should be marketing is I should be marketing via, locally SEO like you guys do because of what it is that I do and where my market is. But see, if you haven't mastered some of those other things and understand how to look at the problem and say, these are the strategies that we're going to employ, then I don't know which courses. So I'm just taking courses, like you said, haphazardly. I don't have a plan at all. I'm just going and doing this stuff, and people keep saying, well, you're an entrepreneur. So I keep beating myself on the chest. The problem is I get home at the end of the day and it's like, I don't have two nickels to rub together because I haven't done the right things that I need to do. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is get people to understand that this is a missing component, and we want those organizations to, to take on, that program that we've developed and, the platform that we've built that actually will deliver it on a one-on-one basis to people and that sort of thing, and give them the opportunity to get that stuff that's stuck in the back of the head that they don't, well, I think this is something I should be doing, but nobody's talking about it, and I don't even know where I'm going to go to get training on it. So, what do I do?
Yeah.
So,
No, it makes total sense. Regarding, have you ever been to like networking events, or what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, networking is a big part of what it is that I do because I find that a lot of my business comes from referrals. So I always have to be networking. I have to find people that, are in that area and in the area. I've identified who those key referral sources are, and I have to be meeting all of the people in those areas. So so based off of what I just said, really from a networking standpoint, what I find that a lot of times entrepreneurs don't go is they're not networking with purpose. Okay, so in other words, they're networking because somebody said you need to network, but they haven't really thought about what's my plan, what am I trying to achieve, and who should I be meeting at these events. Okay, because that may drive even which events should I be going to. You don't go to just any networking function, right? You go to ones that are going to connect you with the right people that you're looking for necessarily. So I always tell people, make sure you have a networking goal before you go to a networking event. Um, that's the way I built mine. Once I know that, then talk to the person that's organized that networking event. So whoever is, checking people in or that's the sponsor for that or whatever, talk to the organizer and tell them what it is that you want to achieve, while you're at that event. Most of those people will know, or who specifically it is that you're trying to meet, or what type of person, what's the persona of the, of that customer that you're looking for. If that's why you're there, you're looking for customers. Um, because that organizer probably knows most of the people that are coming to that event. Okay, and so they can either introduce you to the right people that you should be talking to, or tell you who you should be talking to, instead of there's 100 people in a room, I got to find the needle in the haystack. Tell them what the needle looks like, and they can at least point you in the right direction so you find the needle. So
It's very,
I think those are the things that I would say, from a networking standpoint. Yes, you should be networking, but make sure you understand why you're networking, and go in,
with,
ready to,
yeah.
with a really good plan to execute on. So
No, that's good. And then in terms of, I know we talked about like pillars. I know as a business owner, you're very encompassed in your business, right?
yep,
The challenge is there's other pillars that you should be really thinking about as well. Like if you have a family, you have relationships, you contribute to community, your health. Like these are very strong pillars that you should really, lifestyle choices, right?
absolutely.
Make sure that you have strong pillars in all avenues and not just your business, right? Um, what,
Yep.
what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of know what you want.
It's
Okay.
why. Yep.
So it's not just the why part though. I mean, if you're the owner, you're the leader of your company. Okay. And so your company is only going to be as healthy as you're going to be. And I don't mean just physical health, I'm talking about mental health as well. And so, if you've got demons you got to deal with, you need to step up and deal with the demons. I mean, if you've got, health challenges or, things that you could do better than what I mean, you just have to be honest with yourself. And those are the things, if your family is important to you, then you need to put them at the front of what it is that you're doing. I mean, it's surprising when we go in and we do that personal assessment that we do as a first step in our process with clients, how many times what people want, because a lot of what that really digs into is the owner's personal life. What are the things that you're most proud of in your life? Not your business, in your life. Okay. What, what, and we find typically that things that are really things that are prideful for them and that are important to them in their life, and then we look at the goals that they have set for their business, and they're 180 degrees of the things that they have in their life, and then they wonder why they're miserable. Their yin and yang are out of balance. And so those are the things that we really kind of strive for a lot of times, is understanding really what the owner wants. In a lot of cases, it's like, look, you got to be, if you really believe that, then you got to be healthier. What are you doing about your health? I mean, you shared with me before we kind of went on air the fact that, you've been getting up early and going, because you realize that that's an important part. And you're right. I mean, if you're wearing out early and that sort of thing, then, you got to make your health has got to be one of the things that you're working on a regular basis. I mean, if you want to have life outside, if you've got hobbies and things like that you enjoy doing, you got to make time for those things, as well. So I think a lot of it really comes down to making sure you got to have good time management skills. Okay. And you got to block time off on your calendar to do those other things that are important to you as well. And so, I make time in my calendar for those things, and I plan the business around it.
And that's exactly what I've been doing since I started, right? Like, priorities are my family and relationships and travel and whatever.
Yep.
So I put that in my calendar right off the bat. Then comes the next priority, and then comes whatever your priorities are, like the strongest pillar, put that in your calendar and make sure nothing moves it. You work around those pillars, right?
Right.
If you need to go to the gym 3 times a week, put that in your calendar. No meeting will overcome that, right? Like,
right.
These things are pillars. Then you can work your business around that and the rest of your day, because people don't do that. And that's why there's so many miserable families out there, right? Like,
absolutely.
Business owners work to themselves out of, spending so many hours, and it just doesn't make sense, right? So they have to really focus on what's priority and put that in, and then let the business run.
Well, it's funny because I just read an article that I just scanned it. I posted it to my social review, because I'm going to review, and I'll probably going to post this on my social channels. It was an interview, I think it was an Entrepreneur Magazine did with Microsoft, and talking to Microsoft about saying no. Okay. Because it's like they have hundreds and hundreds of ideas that come up on a regular basis, and it says that they say no to more things than they say yes to, and because because you have limited resources. Remember the functions that I said that were personnel resources and financial resources are 2 of the key drivers of business growth. Okay. So I think as entrepreneurs, we have a tendency to have, I got this idea and that idea. It's what I call shiny object syndrome. And you can't allow that to get distracted, because it sucks your time and it sucks your resources doing those other things instead of focusing on what it is that you need to focus on to get to where it is that you need to get to so that you're independent and financially free. Once you get to that point in your business, then you can do all of the other things that you want to do. I have probably my biggest success story is a company that I worked with out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa for a number of years. And he's a classic guy. He's a home designer. So he designs and draws homes and things like that. I mean, the stuff that he did is just like unbelievable. Some of the beautiful homes that he's created. But he had that shiny object syndrome. Well, once we got them narrowed down on what it was that they needed to do, within 18 months, they had built what they needed that freed him up to do what it was that he wanted to do. And what's funny is he still likes to design and do and draw, homes and things like that. And he'll do that, but very selectively with who he's going to work with and which projects that he's going to do. The rest of his team does all the rest of the work. But what he found out that he really liked, and this is what was getting him hung up, was he really was an entrepreneur. He liked evaluating the deals and opportunities that were coming across his desk, but he was spending too much time doing that. So I told him, if we get this other project done, you can do that. And today, that's all that he spends all of his time with. He's evaluating multi-million-dollar deals and determining whether or not they're going to invest in those deals, or bringing them to other investors, that will look at those things. And, that's what he spends all of his time for. So he learned he was really an entrepreneur. He just needed to learn all the skills. And once I taught him all the skills that he needed to do, he applied them to his own business. And then he was able to go off and do all those other things that kept coming across, all those shiny objects he could actually spend time looking at, because he doesn't have to worry about, can I pay my mortgage and put money, food on the table or not. So those things can come true. It's just, you got to focus on it for a short period of time. And we tell people, if you follow our process, in 3 to 5 years, you can retire from your business and never have to work another day if you don't want to. But most of us, John, I know we had this discussion the other day. You love what you do, so you're never going to stop doing it necessarily. But it'd be nice that you didn't have to get up and do it every day, so that you made sure that, you could buy groceries and that all your bills were paid, right?
Yeah. I still love what I do.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same way. I always want to do that. I just, I don't want to have to get up and go to do it. I want to choose when I can go do it, and, those sorts of things. So,
yeah. Well, this has been a great chat, Dino. I know you're a busy person, so I really want to thank you for giving a lot of your time up to all the listeners. There were a lot of valuable insight and information and advice, and that you covered, right? So how can listeners get a hold of your business and contact you directly?
Okay, so our website is dinoeliadis.com. So that's what the DE Inc. is. So it's my first name and last name. Also, all the tools and everything over the last 3 or 4 years, what we've done, all of the tools and everything that we've kind of developed as a part of all of that, we've began to move that out, and we've branded that under the Business Growth Simplified brand. So if you go to Business Growth Simplified, you'll be able to find us back and forth either way. So dinoeliadis.com or the Business Growth Simplified, that's where you can find all of the tools, and our process and that sort of stuff is out there. And then the other thing that we have, that's a resource that a lot of people I think might be interested in, is we have a blog. Our blog is called yoursmallbusinessgrowth.com. And we get a lot of traffic on that. And that's all information, it doesn't cost you anything to be a member or, to get information off of that. And there's probably 200 plus articles that are written on every aspect of business growth and that sort of thing. So
perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Dino. I know the audience members can definitely reach out to you and read some of your blogs and take a look at your website. But I do want to thank you. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully a lot of our listeners learn a couple things. And thanks a lot.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Thank you.